So, yeah, I probably should have seen some of this coming. Hindsight, right? It's always crystal clear after the fact. But when you're in it, trying to do good work, trying to just get through the week, you miss things. Or maybe you ignore them because facing them head on seems like it'll just blow up your life even more. Turns out, sometimes your life gets blown up anyway. Let's start at the beginning, I guess. The job itself was good, mostly. Challenging, paid the bills, decent people overall. I'd been there a few years, worked my way up, felt pretty competent. My manager, let's call him Michael, well, Michael. You know the type? Comes across super charming at first, knows everyone's name, always has a compliment ready. People liked him. Management loved him because his team hit targets, even if sometimes it felt like we were running on fumes and sheer willpower to do it. The weirdness started small. So small you brush it off. It began with the jokes in team meetings, comments about what I was wearing usually. Nothing overtly gross, not at first, just borderline. Stuff like, wow, my name looking sharp today, trying to distract us from the quarterly report, delivered with a wink. Everyone laughs nervously. I force a tight smile and we move on. But it singles you out, you know? Makes you self-conscious. Then came the proximity stuff, standing just a little too close when reviewing documents at my desk, a hand lingering on my shoulder or arm just a fraction of a second too long after making a point. Again, deniable. Maybe he's just naturally tactile. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But it made my skin crawl. He'd corner me in the hallway sometimes, blocking my path slightly, just for a quick chat that always felt like it lasted 5 minutes too long. You start mapping routes around the office to avoid certain areas. It's exhausting. The texts started creeping in too. Not work stuff, not really. Late evening or weekend texts asking some minor work question that definitely could have waited until Monday. Or sending a link to some article he thought I'd find interesting. Always pushing that professional boundary just slightly. It felt like he was testing the waters, seeing how much he could get away with. And the comments about clothes didn't stop, they just got a bit more specific. That color really suits you. Or nice dress, very professional and flattering. Always said with that same overly friendly smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It just felt off, calculated, like he was cataloging reactions. He also had this habit of pulling me aside for chats, where he'd complain about his own life, his ex-wife, problems with his kids, how lonely he was sometimes, oversharing to an uncomfortable degree. At first, I tried to be sympathetic, you know, just polite, but it quickly felt like he was trying to create this false sense of intimacy, making me his confidant whether I wanted to be or not. It was manipulative, looking back, trying to make me feel sorry for him, maybe obligated to him in some way. I spent months telling myself I was probably imagining things or being too sensitive, that maybe I was the problem, because admitting it was real meant I'd have to do something about it, and doing something felt terrifying. What if I got fired? What if people thought I was making it up? What if it just made everything worse? Then came the night that made ignoring it impossible. We'd had a late meeting, just a few of us, wrapping up a big project. Nothing social, strictly work. But afterwards, like almost midnight, my phone buzzes. It's Michael. A text message that wasn't even subtle anymore. Something along the lines of how impressed he was with my work ethic and how that kind of dedication was really attractive, followed by a winky face emoji. Just, no, absolutely not. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a joke, wasn't accidental proximity. This was direct, unmistakable. And just to make it extra creepy, the next morning there was this ridiculously expensive-looking scarf sitting on my desk in a fancy gift bag. Not company swag, something personal, with a little card signed by him saying something like, "Thought this might keep you warm during those late nights working so hard." Double quote. It felt like ownership, like a claim being staked. That was it. I couldn't keep swallowing this down. It was affecting my work, my sleep, my sanity. I had to report it. I looked up the HR procedures. Our main HR rep, let's call her Nancy, had this whole office mom persona. Super friendly, always asking about your weekend, bringing in cookies. Everyone thought she was great, so approachable. I figured, okay, she's the one. She'll understand. She'll handle this professionally, confidentially. That's literally her job, right? So I schedule a meeting. Walking to her office, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I felt sick. I sat down, took a deep breath, and just laid it out. The comments, the touching, the texts, the gift. I tried to be calm, factual, presenting it as a pattern, not just isolated incidents. Before I really got into the thick of it, though, something just told me. A gut feeling. I fumbled with my phone in my lap for a second, making sure the screen was off, and discreetly tapped the voice recorder app. I live in a single-party consent state, thankfully. I just suddenly felt like I needed proof of this conversation, just in case. Better safe than sorry turned out to be the understatement of the century. Nancy's reaction was perfect. Almost too perfect. She listened intently, nodding, making all the right sympathetic noises. Then she leaned forward, voice hushed, and told me this story about how she'd faced something similar early in her career, how brave I was for speaking up, how she totally understood how awful and violating it felt. She practically radiated fake empathy. Then came the clincher. She put a hand on my arm, looked me right in the eye, and said, "Don't you worry about a thing. This stays between us. Ironclad confidentiality. I'll handle Michael, discreetly but firmly. I'll protect you like you were my own sister. You did the right thing coming to me." I actually felt a wave of relief wash over me. God, I was such an idiot. I thanked her, probably sounding choked up, and left her office feeling like maybe, just maybe, things would get better. That feeling lasted approximately 12 hours. The next day, Michael walked past my desk, didn't even make eye contact, but his whole vibe was just glacial. Gone was the creepy charm, replaced by this icy, hostile silence. It was unnerving. Later that morning, a colleague I actually trusted, Lauren, pulled me aside by the coffee machine, looking worried. She whispered, "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. I was in the break room earlier, and I overheard Nancy talking to Michael. She was laughing. About you. About your complaint. Said something like you were being dramatic and misinterpreting things." She told him everything. My stomach plummeted. Like free fall through ice water, she told him. The ironclad confidentiality. The protect you like a sister. All bullshit. She threw me right under the bus, probably the second I walked out of her office. And she laughed about it. That detail, the laughing, that's what really stuck in my gut like a shard of glass. The retaliation started almost immediately. That afternoon, I got an email from Michael, CCing Nancy, denying my previously approved request to work from home one day the following week to take my cat to the vet. The reason? Operational needs require all team members on site. Bullshit. It had been fine literally 2 days before I talked to HR. Then, a couple of days later, an email from Nancy pops up. A formal performance note added to my file. Subject, concerns regarding timeliness and attention to detail. Inside, vague accusations about missed deadlines. On tasks I was never given clear deadlines for, and minor errors, typos she'd never flagged before. No specifics, just enough to start a paper trail against me. And the workload? Forget it. Suddenly my inbox was flooded with the most tedious, mind-numbing tasks imaginable. Sorting through ancient archived files, data entry that could have been automated, cross-referencing decade-old reports. Stuff designed to keep me busy, keep me buried, keep me away from any high-profile projects where I could actually shine or interact with other departments. It was a clear message. Shut up, stay small, do the grunt work. It felt like psychological warfare. Every day was walking on eggshells. Michael would either ignore me completely, making me feel invisible, or he'd hover, micromanaging every tiny thing I did. He'd ask me to do something one way, then criticize me for not doing it another way he never specified. Nancy, meanwhile, maintained her sickly, sweet office mom facade to my face, asking if I was doing okay while simultaneously adding negative notes to my file behind my back. The escalation was systematic. It wasn't just Michael anymore. Nancy was actively participating. My computer suddenly started having issues. Programs I needed would randomly crash. My access permissions to shared drives would disappear, requiring me to submit a formal request to IT, which then needed, guess who? Nancy's approval to reinstate. Approvals that always seemed to take days, conveniently blocking me from accessing necessary files right before a deadline. Michael would then use these delays they created, as further proof of my poor performance. Then came the impossible deadlines. He assigned me a critical part of a huge project, something that should have taken 2 weeks, easy, and told me he needed it completed and perfect by the end of that week. Friday afternoon. It was Tuesday. When I tried to push back, explaining the realistic timeline, he just gave me this cold stare and said, "High performers find a way." My name. I thought you were a high performer. Setting me up to fail, plain and simple. And Nancy? She started clock-watching me like I was an hourly intern. I came back from lunch 3 minutes late one day because the elevator was jammed. Email from Nancy. Reminder, company policy requires a prompt return from scheduled breaks. Please ensure adherence moving forward. CC'd to my file, of course. The same woman who regularly took 90-minute lunch breaks herself. The hypocrisy was stunning. The anxiety was becoming unbearable. I dreaded going into work. My stomach was constantly in knots. I started having trouble sleeping. I felt isolated. People could sense the tension around me and Michael, and most just steered clear. Lauren was still friendly and private, but even she was careful not to be seen talking to me too much. I felt like I had a target painted on my back, and the people who were supposed to protect me were the ones holding the damn arrows. But amidst the panic and the misery, something else started to grow. Anger. A cold, hard knot of fury deep inside. They thought they could break me, humiliate me, drive me out quietly while covering their own asses. They thought I was weak. They were wrong. I started fighting back in the only way I could, silently, meticulously. If they were building a false paper trail against me, I would build a real one against them. Every passive-aggressive email, every changed deadline, every vague negative comment, saved, time-stamped, backed up to my personal cloud storage every single night. I enabled screen recording software on my work laptop. When Michael sent those infuriating instant messages changing project requirements at the last minute, then later denying he ever said that, recorded. When my permissions magically vanished right before a crucial upload, recorded. Proof of the gaslighting, proof of the sabotage. Those awful one-on-one meetings with Michael, where he'd fluctuate between icy dismissal and sudden bursts of yelling about my attitude or lack of commitment. My phone was always in my pocket, recording audio. Again, single-party consent state, totally legal and absolutely necessary. Hearing his voice laced with that sneering contempt, those veiled threats about my future at the company, it made me shake, but I held on to those recordings like lifelines. I also went digging. I knew where the old digital performance review archives were stored. I found my reviews from the previous 3 years, all glowing, full of praise for my initiative, my skills, my contributions, exceeded expectations every time. I saved PDF copies of every single one, both locally and to my cloud drive. Perfect contrast to the garbage Nancy and Michael were suddenly putting in my file. Evidence isn't just about the bad stuff. It's about proving what the before looked like too, documenting the deliberate destruction. Every piece of data felt like loading another round into a metaphorical magazine. It was the only thing keeping me sane some days, knowing I wasn't just passively taking the abuse. I was collecting receipts, expensive ones. This went on for weeks, maybe a couple of months. The daily grind of hostility, sabotage, and documentation, it was utterly draining. I knew I couldn't sustain it long term. I started quietly looking for other jobs, but the whole situation had destroyed my confidence. Plus, I knew I couldn't just leave, not without making them answer for what they did. The breaking point came unexpectedly, though maybe it was inevitable. I got called into Nancy's office one afternoon. Michael was there too, standing by the window, arms crossed, looking smug. Nancy had this pitying look on her face that made me want to scream. She slid a printed letter across the desk towards me. "We've completed our review," she said, voice dripping with fake professional concern. "After careful consideration of all the facts." What facts? The ones Michael fed her? The ones she fabricated? "We've determined that your initial complaint regarding Mr. Mort Michael's last name's conduct was unsubstantiated. Furthermore, the subsequent issues you raised regarding perceived retaliation appear to stem from performance deficiencies and a misunderstanding of management directives." I stared at the words on the page. Baseless, unsubstantiated, performance deficiencies, misunderstanding. It was all there, in black and white. The official, HR-sanctioned gaslighting. The final nail in the coffin of any hope I had for internal resolution. They weren't just covering for him. They were actively rewriting reality to make me the problem, formally, permanently in my employment record. Something inside me just snapped, not outwardly. No shouting, no tears. Just a sudden, absolute clarity. A calm washed over me, so cold it burned. I knew exactly what I needed to do. This wasn't about saving my job anymore. This was about burning theirs to the ground. I looked up from the letter, met Nancy's gaze, then Michael's smirk. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Okay," I said softly. "Thank you for clarifying." I stood up, left the letter on her desk, and walked out. Back at my own desk, I opened my email, calculated my accrued vacation time and sick leave, plenty to cover more than 2 weeks. Typed out a short, formal resignation email. Effective immediately. My accrued leave will cover the standard notice period. I wish the company well. Sent. Then I started packing my personal belongings into my bag. Quietly, efficiently. Nancy must have gotten the email notification, because she scurried out of her office a few minutes later, looking flustered. "Wait, my name, we need to schedule an exit interview, standard procedure." I just kept packing. Didn't look at her. "Not necessary, Nancy. Everything that needs to be said has been said." She started to protest something about company policy, but I just picked up my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked towards the elevators without a backward glance. I could feel her eyes, and Michael's probably too, boring into my back. Let them watch. Let them think I finally broke. Let them feel smugly victorious that they'd driven me out. They had no idea. This wasn't an exit. This was a tactical retreat. Phase 1 was complete. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, full of their sins, and I couldn't wait to make them pay for every single one. Walking away from that building felt weird, like shedding a skin I didn't even realize was suffocating me. Part of me wanted to just collapse, cry, sleep for a week. Part of me was buzzing with this terrifying righteous energy. They thought they won. They thought I'd just crawl away and disappear. Idiots. The first few days were a blur. Decompression, I guess you'd call it. Lots of staring at walls, lots of junk food, trying to untangle the knot of anger and anxiety in my chest. But every time I started feeling overwhelmed, I'd open the encrypted folder on my personal laptop. Emails, screen recordings, those chilling audio files of Michael's rants, of Nancy's fake promises. It wasn't just my sanity check anymore. It was my arsenal. Once the initial shock wore off, the focus kicked in. This wasn't just about feeling wronged. It was about strategy. I wasn't going after just Michael. Nancy was just as culpable, maybe more so for that sickening betrayal of trust. And the company? They enabled it, ignored it, then actively participated in the cover-up and retaliation. They all needed to answer. I started researching lawyers. Not just any ambulance chaser. I needed someone specific. Someone who understood corporate bullshit from the inside out. Someone sharp, aggressive, and maybe even a little bit ruthless. And crucially, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by the company's army of overpriced legal hacks. It took about 2 weeks of obsessive digging, cross-referencing reviews, looking up case histories. I finally landed on Elena Ramirez. Her profile was impressive. Spent 10 years defending corporations in employment disputes before switching sides. Now she specialized in taking them down. Knew all their tricks, all their pressure points. Bonus points, she had a reputation for working closely with regulatory bodies like the EEOC, hitting companies from multiple angles at once. Perfect setting up the consultation felt like arming a missile. I organized my evidence meticulously. Chronological timeline, categorized files, transcripts of the audio recordings, highlighting the damning parts. Walking into her sleek, modern office, I felt nervous, but also ready. I laid it all out. The harassment, the meeting with Nancy, the recording of Nancy's fake promises, the leak, the systematic retaliation, the paper trail, the PIP threats, the final, unsubstantiated letter, the recordings of Michael's tirades, the screenshot. Elena listened intently, occasionally asking sharp, clarifying questions, her face impassive. She reviewed the key documents, even listened to snippets of the audio, her expression unreadable. When I finally finished, heart pounding again, she leaned back in her chair, looked me dead in the eye, and a slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Well," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. Based on standard corporate defense playbooks for a situation like this, they are monumentally screwed. Then she pointed to the recording of Nancy, especially this. The breach of confidentiality by HR is negligence on stilts. But the fact you have her actively promising ironclad protection, building false rapport, then confirmation she immediately leaked it and participated in the retaliation, that blows their usual rogue manager defense clean out of the water. We can tie this directly to systemic failure, potentially executive knowledge depending on discovery. She then proceeded to pick apart their likely counter-arguments before I even voiced them, outlining precisely how my evidence preempted their standard moves. I felt this huge weight lift. It wasn't just in my head. This was real, and I had a bazooka. Elena wasn't cheap, but she worked partly on contingency for strong cases like this, and she believed we had leverage for a massive outcome. We spent the next week strategizing. She agreed a multi-pronged attack was best. No quiet demand letter first. Hit them hard, hit them publicly, or as publicly as legal filings are, and hit them from the regulatory side simultaneously. So, we did. We filed a comprehensive lawsuit in state court, named Michael personally for harassment and infliction of emotional distress, named Nancy personally for breach of confidentiality, negligence, and aiding and abetting the retaliation, and named the company for illegal retaliation, wrongful termination, constructive discharge since they forced me out, creating a hostile work environment, and negligent supervision. We detailed everything, attached key pieces of documentation, except the recordings, holding those back strategically for discovery or depositions. We asked for substantial damages, lost wages, future lost earnings, emotional distress, punitive damages, the works. And on the same day, Elena filed a detailed formal complaint with the EEOC, citing Title VII violations for harassment and retaliation, and including Nancy's specific role in sabotaging the internal reporting process. Double tap. Let them fight fires on two fronts. The reaction wasn't immediate, but when it came, it was exactly as Elena predicted. First, silence. Then, the company's high-powered external lawyers surfaced. Not their usual in-house counsel, the big guns they bring in for serious trouble. Their first move? Predictable garbage. They reached out to Elena with an insultingly low offer. Think, barely enough to cover my lost wages for a few months. Contingent on me signing an NDA tighter than a submarine hatch and dropping all claims, including the EEOC complaint. Like I'd go through all this just to be bought off with peanuts and silence. We laughed. Elena sent back a one-line reply. We reject your client's wholly inadequate offer. Then came phase 2 of their predictable playbook. Whispers started reaching me through the grapevine. Lauren still gave me occasional cautious updates. The company was trying to spin it internally. Michael was a problematic manager, yes, perhaps acted inappropriate, and they were dealing with him decisively. Reed, getting ready to throw him under the bus. But Nancy? Oh, Nancy was just caught in the middle, maybe mishandled some procedures, but her heart was in the right place. They were clearly trying to sacrifice Michael to protect HR integrity and limit the company's liability for systemic failure. Nice try. We weren't letting Nancy off the hook. Her betrayal was personal. Elena used their predictable strategy against. She countered their lowball offer with a discovery request list that was deliberately vast and invasive, asking for years of Michael's performance reviews, any past complaints against him, sealed or otherwise, Nancy's personnel file, internal HR training materials on confidentiality, executive emails regarding Michael's team performance and problems, IT logs, basically everything they didn't want anyone to see. The goal was to make settling properly seem less painful than discovery. Meanwhile, the EEOC complaint lit a fire. Getting that official notice of a federal investigation rattles cages like nuts. It meant depositions under oath, mandatory document, potential site visit. This wasn't just a private lawsuit. The feds were. That's when Michael got the suspended first, then fired. Lauren texted me. Part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was overshadowed by the fact that Nancy was still there, still playing the victim. Probably helping corporate lawyers build their case against me while crying crocodile tears about how stressful this all was for her. We needed more pressure. Elena had identified a couple of other former employees who'd left Michael's team under vague circumstances in the past couple of years. She reached out. Bingo. One had a nearly identical story of harassment, though she hadn't formally reported it. Just quit. The other had witnessed Michael berating me unfairly multiple times. Both were initially hesitant, but furious enough about what happened to me and their own experiences to agree to give depositions if subpoenaed. Their testimony would corroborate the hostile environment and pattern of behavior. I also started doing my own subtle pushback. Nothing overt, nothing traceable back to me directly that could violate any potential future settlement confidentiality. But I updated my LinkedIn profile, highlighting my skills, and mentioning I was seeking opportunities at companies with a strong ethical culture and zero tolerance for workplace bullying. Innocent enough, right? But people in our industry talk. I joined a few online professional groups and shared anonymous but detailed stories, vaguely disguised but recognizable to insiders, about witnessing retaliation or HR failures on Glassdoor and industry forums, planting seeds of doubt about the company's great place to work image, trying to make it harder for them to recruit good people, hitting them in their talent pool. The pressure was mounting. The EEOC investigation was digging deep. Discovery requests were looming. Witnesses were lining up. The company's attempt to isolate Michael had failed. We were coming for Nancy and institutional failure. Then came the call from Elena. Nancy wants to talk, she said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. Not officially settlement talks yet, but her personal lawyer reached out. She's panicking. Thinks the company is setting her up to take the fall alongside Michael now that the rogue employee angle isn't working. Wants to explore options. This was it. The crack in the dam. Nancy knew what she did. She knew about the recording of her false promises. She knew she was neck deep in the retaliation, and she clearly suspected, or knew, that things were even worse higher up the food chain, and didn't want to be the sacrificial lamb protecting executives. Elena handled it masterfully. No promises were made, but she signaled that significant cooperation might be viewed favorably compared to perjury or obstruction during deposition. The implication hung in the air. Sink with the ship, or find yourself a lifeboat, Nancy. It took another week of agonizing silence. Then, the payload arrived. Nancy's lawyer delivered a package to Elena's office. Not a settlement offer. Evidence. Internal emails Nancy had saved. Chains where she had reported Michael's behavior upwards to a VP months ago, only to be told to handle it quietly and not rock the boat because Michael's team was exceeding sales targets. emails where Nancy expressed concern about legal exposure after my complaint, and the VP essentially told her to manage me out. Emails proving, unequivocally, that the rot went higher. Nancy had documented her CYA attempts, probably fearing this exact scenario. She included specific dates, times, and names. She wasn't just giving up Michael, she was giving up leadership. Elena called me immediately. "We got them," she said, and I could hear the triumph in her voice. "We absolutely got them." Nancy's evidence blew the case wide open. It proved executive knowledge, active cover-up, and direct instruction to retaliate. The company's liability just exploded. Armed with this, Elena went back to the company's lawyers. The negotiation dynamics shifted instantly. It wasn't about if they'd settle, but for how much and what heads would roll. The final resolution took a few more weeks of intense back and forth, but in the end, they caved. Completely. Michael? His firing stood, obviously. Blacklisted. Lauren mentioned he tried sending me some rambling, pathetic email supposedly apologizing but mostly blaming everyone else. Elena advised blocking him. I didn't even read it, just hit delete. Combination of 2.61 for manager and 2.65 for manager. Good riddance. Nancy? She was terminated as part of the settlement agreement. Quietly, but effectively. Elena made sure the details of her breach of confidentiality and participation in the cover-up were implicitly clear in the settlement documentation and the EEOC resolution, even if sealed publicly. An ethics investigation by SHRM or a similar body was almost certain given the circumstances becoming known through industry gossip originating from the mass internal fallout. Even without public court docs, she tried posting some vague nonsense on LinkedIn about moving on to new challenges and toxic workplace, trying to spin herself as a victim. Nobody bought it. Her HR career was toast. Seeing her attempt that pathetic rebranding after what she did, disgusting, but also grimly satisfying to know it wouldn't work. The company? They paid. A lot. The settlement amount was substantial, covering back pay, future earnings, significant emotional distress damages, and all legal fees. Enough to ensure I wouldn't have financial worries for a long, long time. They also had to agree to implement sweeping changes to their HR reporting procedures and anti-retaliation training, overseen by an external monitor chosen by the EEOC. The VP who told Nancy to bury it was forced into early retirement. Heads rolled. And me? Well, the money was validating, obviously, but it wasn't just about that. It was about the fact that they didn't get away with it, that Michael faced consequences, that Nancy faced consequences, that the company was forced to acknowledge its failure. I took a few months off, traveled a bit, tried to heal. The whole ordeal definitely left scars. Trusting people, especially in a corporate setting, felt difficult. That cold knot of anger took a long time to fully dissolve, but underneath it, there was relief, vindication. Then I started job hunting again, cautiously. This time I researched company culture like a hawk, read every Glassdoor review, talked to people in my network, asked tough questions in interviews about their HR practices and how they handle complaints. I ended up landing a great position at a direct competitor, a company known for actually walking the talk on ethics and employee support. Better title, better pay, and a boss who seems genuinely decent. It was a hellish experience, something I wouldn't wish on anyone. But walking into my new office, head held high, knowing I fought back and won, knowing that maybe, just maybe, my fight made things slightly safer for the next person at that old company, that felt pretty damn good. Empowering even. They tried to break me, but in the end, they only made me stronger. And they paid dearly for the lesson. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.